A black waitress named Sarah is humiliated in a luxury restaurant by rich women. But moments later, when an unbelievable twist leaves everyone stunned, the tables turn in a way they never expected. How will the rich women react? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. A black woman named Sarah begins her shift at the restaurant she's working at. She smoothed her crisp black apron as she stepped onto the polished floor of Le Jardin, the upscale restaurant where she worked as a waitress. The gentle clink of fine china and the soft murmur of conversation filled the air, creating a symphony of elegance and wealth. As she prepared for the evening service, Sarah's mind drifted to her other life, her true calling as a Red Cross volunteer. She smiled softly, thinking of the stark contrast between the two worlds she inhabited. Here, among crystal glasses and silver cutlery, she served the city's elite. But in her free time, she rushed to disaster zones, offering comfort and aid to those who had lost everything. "Table 12 needs fresh water," a coworker whispered as he passed by. Sarah nodded, her calm demeanor never wavering. She moved gracefully between tables, refilling glasses and answering questions about the menu with patience and warmth. The restaurant buzzed with activity. Men in expensive suits and women dripping with jewels occupied every table. Sarah couldn't help but notice a dazzling diamond necklace on one patron, its value probably enough to fund an entire Red Cross mission. She pushed the thought away, focusing instead on providing excellent service. As she arranged fresh flowers on a corner table, Sarah overheard snippets of conversation. Stock markets, real estate deals, and upcoming galas. Topics that seemed worlds away from the realities she faced as a volunteer. Yet she treated each guest with equal respect and kindness, her humble nature shining through in every interaction. The maitre d' approached her, his face serious. "Sarah, we have a VIP coming in soon. I need you to handle their table personally." She nodded, accepting the responsibility without hesitation. It was this same steady reliability that made her an asset in emergency situations. As the evening progressed, Sarah moved efficiently through her tasks, her mind occasionally wandering to her upcoming volunteer shift. She knew that tomorrow she'd trade this uniform for a simple Red Cross vest, ready to face whatever challenges came her way. But for now, she was here, present in this glittering world, doing her best to make each guest's experience memorable. As the evening wore on, the restaurant's doors swung open, ushering in a gust of cool air and the unmistakable aura of wealth and privilege. Veronica Hastings, the epitome of high society, sauntered in with her entourage of equally affluent friends. Their laughter, tinged with an air of superiority, cut through the refined ambiance of Le Jardin. The maitre d' rushed to greet them, bowing slightly. "Ms. Hastings, what a pleasure. Your usual table is ready." Veronica's perfectly manicured hand waved dismissively. "We expect nothing but the best tonight. Make sure of it." Sarah, having just been informed of her new assignment, took a deep breath and approached the table. She plastered on a warm smile, determined to provide excellent service despite the group's reputation for being difficult. "Good evening, ladies. Welcome to Le Jardin. My name is Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you tonight," she said, her voice steady and professional. Veronica's eyes raked over Sarah, a smirk playing on her crimson lips. "Oh, how quaint. Tell me, dear, do they make all the help wear those dreadful shoes, or is that a personal choice?" Sarah's cheeks burned, but she maintained her composure. "These are part of our uniform, ma'am. May I start you off with some water, or perhaps our signature cocktails?" One of Veronica's friends chimed in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Water? Darling, do we look like we drink tap water? Bring us your finest champagne, if you even know what that is." Laughter erupted from the table, sharp and cruel. Sarah nodded, jotting down the order. As she turned to leave, another comment reached her ears. "Can you believe they let someone like her serve us? I mean, really, where do they find these people?" Sarah's hand tightened on her notepad, but she kept walking, her head held high. She had faced far worse situations as a Red Cross volunteer. This was nothing compared to the real challenges in life. As she returned with the champagne, Veronica spoke up again. "I hope you don't expect a big tip just for doing your job. Unlike you, we actually work for our money." Sarah carefully poured the champagne, her hand steady despite the sting of the words. "I assure you, ma'am, I'm here to ensure you have a wonderful dining experience. Now, may I tell you about our specials this evening?" As Sarah moved gracefully around the table, refilling champagne flutes and taking orders, the women's conversation grew louder and more malicious. Their words, sharp as knives, cut through the air, each one aimed directly at Sarah. "I bet she lives in some dingy little apartment," one of Veronica's friends snickered, loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Probably shares it with 5 other waitresses." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she poured the champagne, but she steadied herself quickly. She had faced far worse in her volunteer work. This was nothing, she told herself. Veronica, emboldened by her friend's laughter, leaned back in her chair and fixed her gaze on Sarah. Her eyes glittered with cruel amusement. "Tell me, Sarah," she drawled, her voice dripping with disdain. "What's it like to serve your betters every day? Does it make you wish you'd tried harder in school?" The table erupted in laughter, the sound grating against Sarah's ears. She felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, but she kept her expression neutral. Years of dealing with emergencies as a Red Cross volunteer had taught her to remain calm under pressure. "Your lobster bisque, ma'am," Sarah said softly, placing the steaming bowl in front of Veronica. Her voice didn't waver, despite the lump forming in her throat. Veronica wrinkled her nose. "I hope you washed your hands before touching my food. God knows what kind of diseases people like you carry." This comment elicited the loudest laugh yet from the group. Sarah felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. As she turned to fetch the next course, Sarah could hear Veronica stage whisper to her friends, "I swear these people should come with warning labels. Caution, poor person handling your food." The women dissolved into fits of giggles, their voices echoing through the restaurant. Other diners glanced over, some with disapproval, others with morbid curiosity. Sarah took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders as she headed back to the kitchen. She may be a waitress now, but she knew her worth. These women, with all their money and supposed class, couldn't see the strength and compassion that lay beneath her uniform. Sarah held on to that thought, letting it armor her against their cruelty. Sarah retreated to the kitchen, her steps hurried but steady. Once inside, she leaned against the cool metal counter, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. The noise of the kitchen faded away as she focused on calming her racing heart. A gentle hand on her shoulder startled her. Sarah opened her eyes to see Maria, one of the line cooks, looking at her with concern. "You okay, honey?" Maria asked, her kind eyes searching Sarah's face. "Those women out there, they're not being nice, are they?" Sarah tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "It's nothing I can't handle," she said softly, but her voice quivered slightly. Maria shook her head, her expression a mix of anger and sympathy. "Don't you let them get to you, Sarah. You're worth 10 of them put together." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat at Maria's kindness. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her emotions in check. "You know," Maria continued, her voice warm and encouraging, "I heard about what you did last month. How you spent your whole weekend helping at that shelter after the big storm. Not many people would give up their time like that." Sarah blinked in surprise. She hadn't realized anyone at work knew about her volunteer activities. "That's the real you, Sarah," Maria said firmly. "Not what those stuck-up women out there see. You're making a real difference in people's lives. Don't ever forget that." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at Maria's words. She stood a little straighter, squaring her shoulders. "Thank you, Maria," she said softly, a genuine smile finally breaking through. "I needed to hear that." Maria gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Anytime, honey. Now go show those women what real class looks like." With a deep breath, Sarah smoothed down her apron and lifted her chin. She may be just a waitress to Veronica and her friends, but she knew the truth about herself. With renewed strength, She prepared to face the dining room once more. Sarah stepped back onto the restaurant floor, her heart steadier and her resolve stronger. The bustling dining room seemed to quiet for a moment as she took a deep breath, centering herself. With graceful steps, she approached Veronica's table once more. "Ladies, are you ready for your main course?" Sarah asked, her voice calm and professional. Veronica looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Well, look who's back. We thought you'd run off crying." Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled politely. "I apologize for any delay. What can I get for you?" As Sarah took their orders, the women continued their barrage of snide comments. They nitpicked every detail, from the menu descriptions to Sarah's penmanship as she jotted down their requests. "I hope you can read your own writing," Veronica sneered. "We wouldn't want our orders mixed up because the help can't write properly." Sarah felt a flicker of anger, but she pushed it down. "I assure you, everything will be correct," she said softly. As the evening wore on, Sarah moved between tables with quiet efficiency. She refilled water glasses, cleared plates, and answered questions with unwavering patience. All the while, Veronica and her friends grew louder and more demanding. "Hey, waitress!" Veronica called out, snapping her fingers. "We need more bread over here, and make it snappy." Sarah nodded, hurrying to fulfill their request. As she placed the bread basket on their table, one of Veronica's friends deliberately knocked her glass over, spilling red wine across the white tablecloth. "Oh, clumsy me," the woman said with a smirk. "You'd better clean that up before it stains." Sarah bit her lip, fighting back tears as she quickly mopped up the spill. The women's laughter rang in her ears, but she kept her head down, focused on her task. As the night progressed, the women's behavior became increasingly obnoxious. They sent dishes back to the kitchen for imaginary flaws, complained about the temperature of the room, and made loud, disparaging comments about other diners. Through it all, Sarah maintained her composure. She moved through the dining room with quiet dignity, her kindness unwavering even in the face of such cruelty. Other patrons began to notice, throwing sympathetic glances her way and treating her with extra kindness. As the evening wore on, Veronica scanned the menu with a critical eye. Her lips curled into a smirk as she spotted a particularly complex dish. "I'll have the lobster thermidor," she announced, her voice dripping with condescension. "And make sure it's prepared exactly right. I doubt someone like you has ever even tasted such a refined dish." Sarah nodded politely, jotting down the order. "Of course, ma'am. I'll make sure the kitchen knows your preferences." As Sarah walked away, Veronica's friends tittered with laughter. "Did you see her face?" one of them whispered loudly. "She probably doesn't even know what thermidor means." Sarah's cheeks burned, but she held her head high as she relayed the order to the kitchen. She took extra care to ensure every detail was correct, double-checking with the chef to guarantee perfection. When the dish arrived, Sarah carried it to the table with careful precision. She set it before Veronica with a gentle smile. "Your lobster thermidor, ma'am. Please let me know if there's anything else you need." Veronica's eyes narrowed as she inspected the plate. She poked at the lobster with her fork, searching for any flaw she could find. "It looks adequate," she said grudgingly. As Veronica and her friends continued their meal, their loud complaints and cruel comments began to draw attention. Other diners cast disapproving glances their way, their expressions a mix of disgust and sympathy for Sarah. An older couple at a nearby table watched as Sarah deftly handled each of Veronica's demands. The woman leaned towards her husband and whispered, "That poor girl. She's handling this so gracefully." Her husband nodded in agreement. "I've never seen such patience. She's got nerves of steel." As the night progressed, more and more patrons began to notice Sarah's unwavering professionalism in the face of such blatant disrespect. They watched in quiet admiration as she moved through the restaurant, her kindness never faltering despite the abuse she endured. A palpable tension filled the air, with many diners shooting disapproving looks at Veronica's table. Yet Sarah remained a calm presence, her gentle demeanor a stark contrast to the women's cruelty. Veronica took a sip of her wine, her eyes gleaming with malice as she watched Sarah approach their table once more. She leaned back in her chair, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "So, Sarah, Veronica drawled, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Tell me, where did you go to school? I'm sure it must have been quaint." Sarah paused, her hands clasped in front of her apron. "I attended the local high school, ma'am," she replied softly. Veronica's laugh was sharp and mocking. "Oh, how charming. I'm sure that prepared you well for your illustrious career in food service." The other women at the table shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them, a blonde named Amanda, bit her lip and looked down at her plate, unable to meet Sarah's eyes. "And what about travel?" Veronica pressed on, ignoring the growing unease around her. "Have you ever left this little town? I'm sure the world must seem so big and scary to someone like you." Sarah took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she refilled Veronica's water glass. "I haven't had the opportunity to travel much," she admitted, her voice steady despite the hurt in her eyes. "Of course you haven't," Veronica sneered. "I bet you've never even seen the ocean. It's sad, really, how small your world must be." Sarah managed a kind smile, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Everyone's path is different, ma'am. I'm grateful for the experiences I've had." Veronica rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, spare me the Hallmark card sentiments. I'm sure your experiences are just thrilling. Tell me, what's the highlight of your week? Mopping floors?" The other women at the table exchanged uncomfortable glances. Jessica, seated to Veronica's right, cleared her throat softly, as if about to speak, but then thought better of it and remained silent. Sarah stood tall, her voice gentle but firm. "Is there anything else I can get for you, ladies?" Veronica waved her hand dismissively. "Just try not to mess up our bill. I know math can be so challenging for some people." As Sarah walked away, her back straight and her head held high, the tension at the table was palpable. The other women avoided each other's gazes, their laughter now forced and hollow in the wake of Veronica's cruelty. Sarah approached the table with a tray laden with steaming plates, her steps steady despite the weight of the dishes and the cruel words she'd endured. She carefully placed each plate in front of the women, her movements graceful and precise. "Here's your herb-crusted salmon, ma'am," Sarah said softly, setting the last plate in front of Veronica. Veronica's eyes narrowed as she inspected the dish. "Well, I suppose even someone like you can't mess up putting food on a plate," she sneered. "It's probably the height of your capabilities, isn't it?" Sarah remained silent, her face a mask of professionalism. But Veronica wasn't finished. "You know," Veronica continued, her voice dripping with contempt, "I bet this is all you'll ever do with your life. Waiting tables, scraping by. It's sad, really. Some people just aren't meant for anything more." The other women at the table laughed, but their laughter sounded forced and uncomfortable. Amanda's eyes darted between Sarah and Veronica, a flicker of shame crossing her face. Sarah took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Is there anything else I can get for you, ladies?" she asked, her voice steady despite the hurt evident in her eyes. Veronica smirked. "No, I think you've done quite enough. Run along now." As Sarah turned to leave, the women at the table fell silent. Jessica pushed her food around her plate, no longer meeting anyone's gaze. Even Veronica seemed slightly deflated, as if her cruelty had left a bitter taste in her mouth. Sarah walked away, her back straight and her head held high. The quiet dignity in her demeanor stood in stark contrast to the petty cruelty she had just endured. As she disappeared into the kitchen, the women at the table exchanged uncomfortable glances. Amanda cleared her throat softly. "Maybe we should ease up a bit," she suggested timidly. "She's just doing her job." Veronica shot her a sharp look, but for once she didn't have a cutting remark ready. The table lapsed into an uneasy silence, the weight of their behavior settling over them like a heavy cloud. The restaurant buzzed with chatter and the clink of cutlery. Veronica lifted her fork to her mouth, still wearing a smug expression after her cruel remarks to Sarah. But as she swallowed a bite of the salmon, her eyes suddenly widened in alarm. Veronica's hand flew to her throat, her face turning an alarming shade of red. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she made a horrible choking sound that cut through the din of the restaurant. "Veronica?" Jessica gasped, her voice rising in panic. "Oh my God, she's choking!" The other women at the table froze, their faces masks of horror and helplessness. Amanda jumped to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Someone do something!" she cried, looking around wildly. The restaurant fell silent as all eyes turned to their table. Veronica's face was now turning purple, her eyes bulging with fear as she struggled to breathe. Sarah, who had been clearing a nearby table, whirled around at the commotion. In an instant, she assessed the situation and sprang into action. She rushed to Veronica's side, her face set with determination. "Stand back," Sarah commanded, her voice calm but firm. The other woman scrambled out of the way as Sarah positioned herself behind Veronica. With practiced movements, Sarah wrapped her arms around Veronica's waist. She placed one hand just above Veronica's navel and grasped it with her other hand. Then, with swift, powerful thrusts, Sarah began to perform the Heimlich maneuver. The entire restaurant watched in tense silence as Sarah worked to dislodge the food from Veronica's airway. Seconds ticked by like hours. Veronica's face was now a frightening shade of blue. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, Veronica suddenly coughed violently. A piece of salmon flew from her mouth, landing on the pristine white tablecloth. Veronica gasped, sucking in great gulps of air as color slowly returned to her face. With the food dislodged, Veronica gasped for breath, her chest heaving as she gulped in precious air. Sarah gently supported her, helping her sit upright in her chair. The restaurant erupted in thunderous applause, the sound washing over them like a wave. "You're okay now," Sarah said softly, her hand on Veronica's back. "Just take slow, deep breaths." Veronica nodded weakly, still too shaken to speak. Her friends huddled around her, their faces pale with shock and relief. "That was amazing," a man at a nearby table called out. "You saved her life." More voices joined in, praising Sarah's quick thinking and bravery. The restaurant manager hurried over, his face a mixture of concern and admiration. "Sarah, that was incredible," he said, patting her on the shoulder. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked Veronica. Veronica managed a small nod, her eyes wide and glassy. She looked up at Sarah, seeing her for the first time as if a veil had been lifted. The woman she had mocked and belittled just moments ago had just saved her life. The gravity of what had just happened began to sink in. Jessica, one of Veronica's friends, burst into tears. "Oh my God, Veronica," she sobbed. "We thought we were going to lose you." Amanda, who had been so quick to join in the cruel teasing earlier, now looked ashamed. "We didn't know what to do," she whispered. "If Sarah hadn't been here?" The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Veronica's gaze remained fixed on Sarah, who was now stepping back to give her some space. I don't know what to say," Veronica finally managed, her voice hoarse. "You saved my life." Sarah smiled gently. "I'm just glad you're okay," she said. "I'm trained for emergencies like this with the Red Cross." The other women at the table exchanged glances, the realization dawning on them that there was so much more to Sarah than they had assumed. Their earlier mockery now seemed not just cruel, but utterly foolish. As the adrenaline began to fade, Veronica felt tears welling up in her eyes. The enormity of what had just happened and how close she had come to death hit her all at once. And through it all, Sarah stood there, a beacon of compassion and strength. Veronica sat in her chair, her body still trembling from the near-death experience. Her eyes, wide and glistening with unshed tears, were fixed on Sarah. The waitress she had cruelly mocked just moments ago now stood before her as a lifesaver, a guardian angel in a simple uniform. The restaurant had fallen into a hushed silence, all eyes on the unfolding scene. Veronica's friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the weight of their earlier behavior pressing down on them like a physical force. I can't believe it," Veronica whispered, her voice barely audible. Sarah's face softened with compassion. "It's okay," she said gently. The kindness in Sarah's voice seemed to break something inside Veronica. A sob escaped her lips, and she covered her face with her hands. The other women at the table looking, shame coloring their faces. Amanda, who had laughed the loudest at Veronica's cruel jokes, couldn't even meet Sarah's eyes. "I didn't know," Jessica said softly, looking at Sarah with newfound respect. About the Red Cross, I mean. That's amazing. Sarah smiled modestly. It's just something I do to help others. I believe everyone has value, no matter their job or background. Her words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the group's earlier sneers about Sarah's worth. The other diners in the restaurant murmured in agreement, many nodding approvingly at Sarah's humble wisdom. Veronica finally looked up, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. The arrogance that had defined her earlier was gone, replaced by a vulnerability that made her seem younger, more human. "I've been so wrong," she said, her voice cracking. "About everything. About you." As the applause faded, Sarah tried to slip back into her role as a waitress. She smoothed down her apron and picked up a water pitcher, ready to refill glasses and return to her duties. But the other diners weren't about to let her fade into the background. "Excuse me," an elderly gentleman called out, his eyes twinkling with admiration. "That was incredible! Where did you learn to do that?" Sarah blushed, unused to being the center of attention. "Oh, it's just part of my training," she said softly. A woman at a nearby table leaned in, curiosity written across her face. "Training? Are you a nurse?" Sarah shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "No, ma'am. I volunteer with the Red Cross in my free time." A ripple of impressed murmurs swept through the restaurant. Veronica and her friends, still seated at their table, looked at each other in disbelief. "The Red Cross?" Amanda whispered, her voice filled with awe. "But that means—" Jessica finished her thought. "She spends her time off helping people in need." The elderly gentleman who had first spoken up nodded approvingly. "That's wonderful, young lady. How long have you been volunteering?" Sarah's cheeks reddened even more, but she answered politely. "About 5 years now. I started right after high school." As Sarah continued to explain her volunteer work, describing the emergency response training and the community outreach programs she participated in, Veronica felt her world tilting on its axis. The woman she had dismissed as nothing more than a lowly waitress was, in reality, a trained lifesaver who dedicated her spare time to helping others. Veronica's friends seemed equally shaken. They exchanged glances filled with shame and regret, the full weight of their earlier behavior crashing down on them. As Sarah continued to answer questions from the other patrons, Veronica's friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The weight of their earlier behavior pressed heavily on their consciences. Emily, her eyes brimming with tears, was the first to break the silence among their group. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I can't stand this anymore," she said, her voice quavering. She approached Sarah, who had just finished refilling water glasses at a nearby table. "Sarah," Emily began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm so sorry. The way we treated you, it was horrible. You didn't deserve any of that." Sarah turned to face Emily, surprise evident in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but Emily continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. "You saved Veronica's life without hesitation, even after everything we said to you. I feel so ashamed. Can you ever forgive us?" Sarah's expression softened. "Of course," she said gently. "It's okay." Emily's apology seemed to break a dam within the group. Jessica stood up next, followed by Amanda and Melissa. They gathered around Sarah, each offering their own heartfelt apologies. "We were cruel and thoughtless," Jessica admitted, her voice thick with emotion. Amanda nodded vigorously. "You showed us what true strength and kindness look like. We have a lot to learn from you." As her friends expressed their remorse, Veronica remained seated at the table, her mind reeling. She stared at her hands, clenched tightly in her lap, as a storm of emotions raged within her. The realization that Sarah, the very person she had belittled and mocked, had saved her life without a moment's hesitation, left her feeling small and ashamed. Veronica's throat felt tight, and her chest ached with a mixture of guilt, gratitude, and confusion. She wanted to join her friends, to apologize like they had, but the words seemed stuck. How could she possibly make amends for her behavior? How could Sarah have acted with such kindness in the face of such cruelty? As the chatter in the restaurant continued around her, Veronica remained silent, grappling with the reality of what had transpired and the profound impact of Sarah's actions. As Sarah continued her shift, moving gracefully between tables, Veronica and her friends sat in uncomfortable silence. The weight of their earlier behavior hung heavily in the air, mingling with the lingering shock of Veronica's near-death experience. Emily, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, was the first to speak. "I can't believe how we acted," she said softly, her voice filled with shame. "We've been so caught up in our own little world, thinking we were better than everyone else." Jessica nodded, twisting her napkin in her hands. "And look at Sarah. We treated her like dirt, but she didn't hesitate to save Veronica's life. She's got more class and kindness in her little finger than we have in our whole bodies." Amanda leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "You know, I overheard her talking about her volunteer work with the Red Cross. Can you imagine? While we've been shopping and gossiping, she's been out there actually making a difference in people's lives." The group fell silent for a moment, watching as Sarah efficiently cleared a nearby table, offering a warm smile to the departing customers. Melissa sighed deeply. "We've been so focused on material things, our clothes, our cars, our social status. But what has it gotten us? We're not happy. We're not fulfilled. And we certainly haven't become better people." Emily nodded in agreement. "Sarah has so little compared to us, at least in terms of money and possessions. But look at her. She's confident, kind, and clearly respected by everyone here. Maybe we've been valuing the wrong things all along." As the friends continued their introspection, Veronica remained silent, her eyes fixed on Sarah. The realization of how empty her own life had been in comparison to the waitress she had so cruelly mocked was slowly sinking in, forcing her to confront uncomfortable truths about herself and the life she had been living. Veronica sat at the table, her hands trembling as she watched Sarah move gracefully through the restaurant. The weight of her actions pressed heavily on her chest, making it hard to breathe. After what felt like an eternity, she slowly stood up, her legs feeling weak beneath her. I need to talk to her," Veronica whispered to her friends, who nodded encouragingly. With small, hesitant steps, Veronica made her way across the room. Her heart pounded in her ears as she approached Sarah, who was arranging menus at the hostess stand. "Sarah." Veronica's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Sarah turned, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. "Yes, Miss Hastings? Is everything all right?" Veronica felt tears welling up in her eyes. "No, it's not. I need to apologize to you." Sarah's expression softened, and she waited patiently for Veronica to continue. "I'm so sorry," Veronica began, her voice trembling with emotion. "The way I treated you, it was awful. I was cruel and mean, and you didn't deserve any of it." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "I misjudged you so badly, Sarah. And then you saved my life without hesitation." Tears were now flowing freely down Veronica's cheeks. "I can't thank you enough for what you did. You're an amazing person, and I've been so blind. Can you ever forgive me?" Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she listened to Veronica's heartfelt words. After a moment, she reached out and gently touched Veronica's arm. "Of course I forgive you," Sarah said softly, a warm smile spreading across her face. "What happened earlier doesn't matter now. I'm just glad you're okay." Veronica felt a wave of relief wash over her at Sarah's words and kind gesture. She looked into Sarah's eyes, seeing nothing but compassion and understanding. Veronica returned to her table, her eyes still glistening with tears. Her friends looked at her expectantly, their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Well," Emily asked softly, "how did it go?" Veronica took a deep breath. "She forgave me, just like that. After everything we said and did, she forgave me without hesitation." The women exchanged glances, their faces etched with shame and admiration. "We need to do something," Veronica said firmly. We can't just apologize and move on. We need to make this right. Emily nodded eagerly. You're absolutely right. But what can we do? Veronica's eyes lit up with an idea. Sarah mentioned she volunteers with the Red Cross. Maybe we could support her work somehow? The group fell silent for a moment, considering the suggestion. Then, one by one, they began to nod in agreement. That's a wonderful idea, said Jessica, another member of their group. We could donate money, or even better, volunteer ourselves. As they discussed various ways to help, their conversation shifted. The usual chatter about designer clothes and exclusive parties was replaced by talk of charity events and community service. You know, Veronica said thoughtfully, I never realized how empty our lives were until now. We've been so focused on ourselves, on material things. But look at Sarah. She doesn't have much, but she seems so fulfilled. The others murmured in agreement, their faces reflecting a mix of realization and regret. Maybe it's time we started giving back, Emily suggested. We have so much. Imagine the difference we could make if we used our resources to help others instead of just ourselves. As they continued to brainstorm ideas, their excitement grew. They discussed organizing fundraisers, using their social connections to raise awareness for important causes, and even getting personally involved in volunteer work. As the evening wore on, Veronica and her friends found themselves transformed by their encounter with Sarah. The weight of their earlier behavior hung heavy on their hearts, but it was now coupled with a newfound sense of purpose. With determined looks, they approached Sarah once more as she cleared a nearby table. Sarah tensed slightly, unsure of what to expect. Veronica stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. Sarah, we've been talking and, well, we want to help. Not just with words, but with action. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. Help? What do you mean? Emily chimed in, her face earnest. We want to use our resources, our money, our connections, to support the causes you care about, like the Red Cross. We could organize fundraisers, Jessica added enthusiastically, or use our social media to raise awareness, whatever you think would be most helpful. Sarah stood speechless, her hand still clutching a stack of plates. She looked from one face to another, searching for any sign of insincerity, but all she saw was genuine eagerness and hope. I don't know what to say, Sarah finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. That's incredibly generous of you. Veronica reached out and gently touched Sarah's arm. It's the least we can do. You've shown us what really matters in life. We want to make a difference, just like you do. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. She had never expected this outcome when she came to work today. The transformation she witnessed in these women was nothing short of miraculous. Thank you, Sarah said softly. This means more than you know. The Red Cross could really use the support, and there are so many other local charities that could benefit too. The women nodded eagerly, hanging on Sarah's every word. They peppered her with questions about her volunteer work and the needs of various organizations, their excitement growing with each answer. As Sarah shared her passion for helping others, she saw a spark ignite in the eyes of Veronica and her friends. It was a spark of purpose, of the joy that comes from giving rather than taking. As the group continued their conversation, Veronica's eyes suddenly lit up with inspiration. She turned to Sarah, her voice filled with excitement. I have an idea, Veronica said, her hands clasping together. What if we host a charity gala for the Red Cross, and you, Sarah, could be our guest of honor? The other women gasped in delight, nodding enthusiastically. Emily clapped her hands together, exclaiming, Oh, that's perfect. We could invite all the most influential people in town. Jessica chimed in, and we could have a silent auction with luxury items. That always brings in big donations. Sarah's eyes widened, overwhelmed by the sudden flood of ideas. She bit her lip, hesitation clear on her face. I don't know. That sounds like such a big event. And me, as the guest of honor? Veronica reached out, gently touching Sarah's arm. You deserve it, Sarah. Your dedication to helping others should be celebrated. Sarah looked around at the eager faces of the women, their excitement palpable. She took a deep breath, considering the potential impact such an event could have. "Think about it," Emily urged softly. "The funds we could raise. Imagine how many people the Red Cross could help with that kind of support." Sarah's resolve began to strengthen as she thought about all the good that could come from this opportunity. She nodded slowly, a small smile spreading across her face. "You're right," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "If this gala could help even more people in our community, then I'm in." The women cheered, their faces beaming with joy. Veronica pulled out her phone, already starting to make notes. "This is going to be amazing," Veronica declared, her eyes shining with determination. "We'll make sure it's the most successful charity event this town has ever seen." As the women began to excitedly discuss plans for the gala, Sarah watched in amazement. She never could have imagined that her act of kindness would lead to such a tremendous opportunity to make a difference. As the excitement settled, the group of friends began to organize themselves for the upcoming charity gala. Each woman found herself naturally gravitating towards tasks that matched her skills and interests. Veronica, with her natural leadership abilities, took charge of coordinating the overall event. She pulled out her tablet and started creating a detailed checklist. "Okay, ladies," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to make this the most spectacular gala this town has ever seen." Emily, who had a flair for design, volunteered to handle the decorations and theme. "I'm thinking elegant but not stuffy," she mused, her eyes sparkling with ideas. "Maybe we could incorporate elements that represent the Red Cross's mission?" Jessica, known for her extensive social network, offered to handle the guest list. "I'll make sure we have all the right people there," she said confidently. "We want maximum impact for our fundraising efforts." As they continued to plan, Sarah watched in amazement. She had never seen these women so focused and passionate about something that didn't revolve around themselves. It warmed her heart to see their genuine enthusiasm for helping others. Melissa, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. I'd like to help with the silent auction," she said softly. "My father owns an art gallery. I'm sure he'd be willing to donate some pieces." The others looked at Melissa in surprise. They had always known her as the shy one of the group, rarely offering input. Veronica reached out and squeezed Melissa's hand, smiling warmly. "That's a wonderful idea, Mel, thank you." As they worked, the women found themselves sharing stories and laughing together in a way they never had before. They discovered common interests beyond their usual topics of fashion and gossip. Sarah joined in, offering insights from her experiences with the Red Cross. "You know," Emily said during a lull in the conversation, "I never realized how good it would feel to do something like this. It's like, I finally have a real purpose." The others nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting a mix of surprise and contentment. Veronica looked around at her friends, her eyes misty. "I think we're all learning that there's more to life than we thought," she said softly. As they continued planning, the women found themselves growing closer, bonding over their shared goal of making a difference. The superficial barriers that had once defined their friendship began to crumble, replaced by a deeper, more meaningful connection. As the days passed, Sarah's quiet strength and humility continued to inspire the women as they prepared for the gala. Her unwavering dedication to helping others, even in the face of their previous cruelty, served as a constant reminder of the person they aspired to become. Veronica, in particular, underwent a remarkable transformation. The once haughty and arrogant woman began to shed her old ways, embracing a more compassionate outlook on life. She found herself pausing before speaking, considering the impact of her words on others. Her sharp tongue, once used to belittle, now sought to uplift and encourage. One afternoon, as they worked on the gala preparations, Veronica approached Sarah with a hesitant smile. "Sarah," she began, her voice soft, "I wanted to thank you again, not just for saving my life, but for showing us a better way to live." Sarah looked up, surprised by Veronica's candor. "You're welcome, Veronica," she replied warmly. "But you're the ones doing all this amazing work now. You should be proud of yourselves." Veronica shook her head, her eyes glistening. We wouldn't be doing any of this if it weren't for you. Your kindness, it changed everything." As the women continued to work alongside Sarah, their friendship deepened, rooted in a newfound respect and admiration for the woman who had changed their lives. They found themselves eager to learn from her, asking about her experiences with the Red Cross and the people she had helped. Emily, who had once been quick to judge others based on their appearance, now listened intently as Sarah shared stories of the diverse individuals she had met through her volunteer work. "It's amazing how much we miss when we only look at the surface," Emily mused, her perspective forever altered. Jessica, who had always prided herself on her extensive social network, realized the hollowness of many of her connections. She found herself drawn to Sarah's genuine warmth and the depth of her relationships with her fellow volunteers. "I want to build friendships like that," Jessica confided to the group one day. "Real ones based on more than just status or what people can do for me." As they worked together, the women's bond with Sarah grew stronger. They found themselves sharing personal stories and vulnerabilities they had never revealed before, even to each other. Sarah's non-judgmental nature created a safe space for them to open up and grow. The night of the charity gala finally arrived, and the restaurant was transformed into a glittering wonderland. Soft lights twinkled from every corner, and elegant floral arrangements adorned each table. The air buzzed with excitement as guests, many of whom had been present on that fateful night, filed in, dressed in their finest attire. Veronica and her friends stood near the entrance, greeting guests with warm smiles and heartfelt thanks. They looked radiant, but it wasn't just their designer gowns that made them shine. There was a new light in their eyes, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. Sarah arrived, looking beautiful in a simple blue dress. The women rushed to greet her, enveloping her in a group hug. "We couldn't have done this without you," Veronica whispered, her voice thick with emotion. As the evening progressed, the event proved to be a resounding success. The restaurant was filled to capacity, with people from all walks of life coming together to support the cause. The sound of laughter and conversation filled the air, punctuated by the clink of glasses and the soft strains of music from the live band. Veronica stepped up to the microphone, her hands shaking slightly as she smoothed down her elegant gown. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the woman who had once been known for her arrogance and cruelty. Now she stood before them transformed, humility radiating from her very being. "Good evening, everyone," Veronica began, her voice trembling with emotion. "I stand before you tonight, not just as a host of this wonderful event, but as someone whose life has been forever changed." She paused, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Her gaze found Sarah in the crowd, and she smiled softly. "A few weeks ago, I was a different person. I thought I had everything: money, status, power. But I was empty inside, filling that void with cruelty and disdain for others." Veronica's voice cracked and she blinked back tears. "It took a near-death experience and the kindness of someone I had wronged to show me what really matters in life." "Sarah," she said, gesturing to where Sarah stood, "you didn't just save my life that night, you saved my soul." The room was silent, hanging on Veronica's every word. Her friends standing nearby wiped away tears of their own. "I treated Sarah horribly," Veronica admitted, her voice heavy with regret. "I belittled her, mocked her, and made her feel less than human. And yet, when I was choking, when my life was in danger, Sarah didn't hesitate for a second. She saved me, showing a compassion and strength I couldn't even begin to comprehend at the time." Veronica's voice broke again, and this time she let the tears fall freely. "Sarah, I can never thank you enough for what you've done, not just for saving my life, but for opening my eyes to what truly matters. Your kindness, your dedication to helping others through your volunteer work. It's shown me and my friends a whole new way of living." She turned her gaze back to the audience, her eyes shining with tears and newfound purpose. "I stand before you today, humbled and changed. I realize now how shallow and misguided my life had been. Sarah's actions have had a profound impact on me and my friends. We've learned that true fulfillment comes not from what we have, but from what we give." As Veronica stepped down from the podium, wiping tears from her eyes, The room erupted in applause. The event organizer then invited Sarah to the stage. Sarah hesitated for a moment, unused to being in the spotlight, but with gentle encouragement from those around her, she made her way to the microphone. Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the crowd. She saw faces filled with warmth and expectation, so different from the night when she had first encountered Veronica and her friends. With a soft smile, she began to speak. "Good evening, everyone," Sarah said, her voice quiet but clear. "I'm not used to speaking in front of crowds like this. Usually, I'm behind the scenes, helping where I can." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "My journey as a Red Cross volunteer started 5 years ago. I was looking for a way to make a difference, to give back to my community. What I found was so much more than that." Sarah's eyes lit up as she continued, her passion for her work shining through. "I've seen people at their most vulnerable, in times of crisis and disaster. But I've also seen the incredible strength of the human spirit, the way people come together to help one another in times of need." As she spoke, the audience hung on her every word. Many dabbed at their eyes, moved by Sarah's sincerity and the power of her experiences. "Compassion and kindness," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "These are not just nice words. They're actions. They're choices we make every day. Whether it's helping a stranger in need or forgiving someone who's wronged us, these small acts of kindness can change lives." She glanced at Veronica and her friends, offering them a warm smile. "Sometimes the people we least expect can teach us the most important lessons. Every person has value, has something to offer. When we open our hearts to others, when we choose to be kind, we create a ripple effect of goodness that can transform our world." As Sarah concluded her speech, the room was filled with a profound silence, broken only by sniffles and the sound of tissues being pulled from purses. Then, as if a dam had broken, applause thundered through the room. People rose to their feet, giving Sarah a standing ovation. The event organizer returned to the microphone, visibly moved. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm thrilled to share that tonight's event has raised an amount far beyond our wildest expectations. Your generosity will make a significant impact on the Red Cross's ability to help those in need." In the days following the gala, Veronica and her friends found themselves embarking on a new chapter in their lives. The event had sparked a genuine desire to make a difference, and they were eager to follow Sarah's lead. Sarah, touched by their enthusiasm, invited them to join her on various community outreach programs. At first, the women felt out of place in their designer clothes, standing in soup kitchens and homeless shelters. But Sarah's gentle guidance and unwavering compassion soon helped them find their footing. Veronica, once obsessed with maintaining her social status, now spent her weekends sorting donated clothes at the local shelter. Her manicured hands, once used to pointing out others' flaws, now carefully folded secondhand sweaters and jackets. As she worked, she found herself chatting with the shelter's residents, listening to their stories with genuine interest. Emily, who had always prided herself on her exclusive social circle, discovered a new kind of friendship among the elderly at a nursing home where Sarah volunteered. She found joy in reading to them, holding their hands, and simply being present. The gratitude in their eyes filled a void in her heart she hadn't even known existed. As the weeks passed, the women's lives began to change in ways they never expected. Their conversations, once filled with gossip and materialism, now revolved around upcoming volunteer events and ways to make a bigger impact. They found themselves canceling spa appointments to attend Red Cross training sessions and swapping designer handbags for comfortable shoes better suited for long hours of community service. The fulfillment they found in helping others was unlike anything they had experienced before. Veronica, in particular, felt as if she was truly living for the first time. She often caught herself smiling for no reason, her heart light with the knowledge that she was making a real difference in people's lives. One afternoon, as they all gathered at a local park to help with a community cleanup, Veronica looked around at her friends. Their faces were flushed with exertion, their hands dirty from picking up litter, but their eyes shone with happiness. She realized that their lives, once filled with luxury and excess, were now enriched with purpose and meaning. As the weeks turned into months, Veronica and Sarah's friendship blossomed like a delicate flower in the spring. The two women, once worlds apart, now found themselves spending more and more time together outside of their volunteer work. One sunny afternoon, they sat in a small cafe, sipping tea and chatting about their latest community project. Veronica couldn't help but marvel at how natural it felt to be in Sarah's company. Gone was the haughty socialite who would have sneered at the quaint little shop. In her place sat a woman humbled by life's lessons and grateful for true friendship. As Sarah spoke passionately about their upcoming fundraiser for the local children's hospital, Veronica found herself lost in thought. She reflected on the whirlwind of changes that had swept through her life since that fateful night at the restaurant. "You know," Veronica said softly, interrupting Sarah mid-sentence, "I can hardly recognize myself these days." Sarah tilted her head, a gentle smile playing on her lips. "How so?" Veronica's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I used to think happiness came from having the latest designer bag or being seen at the right parties. But now—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Now I know true joy comes from making a difference in someone's life." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Veronica's hand. "That's beautiful, Veronica. I'm so proud of how far you've come." Veronica chuckled softly, wiping away a stray tear. "It's all thanks to you, Sarah. You showed me what really matters in life. I was so caught up in my own little world of wealth and status that I couldn't see the beauty of helping others." As they continued to talk, Veronica realized how much her priorities had shifted. The thrill of buying expensive things paled in comparison to the warmth she felt when a child at the shelter hugged her in gratitude. The rush of being admired at social gatherings couldn't match the satisfaction of knowing she had made a real difference in someone's life. The transformation of Veronica and her friends didn't go unnoticed in their affluent social circle. At charity galas and high society events, whispers circulated about the dramatic change in their behavior and priorities. People who had known Veronica for years were astounded by her newfound humility and dedication to helping others. One evening, at a lavish fundraiser for the local art museum, Veronica's old friend Melissa approached her with curiosity. "Veronica, darling," Melissa said, her voice tinged with both admiration and disbelief. "I hardly recognize you these days. What's come over you?" Veronica smiled warmly, her eyes twinkling with a joy Melissa had never seen before. "I've discovered what truly matters in life, Melissa. It's not about the clothes we wear or the parties we attend. It's about the lives we touch and the difference we make." As Veronica shared her story and the impact Sarah had on her life, Melissa found herself captivated. The sincerity in Veronica's words and the passion with which she spoke about her volunteer work struck a chord deep within Melissa's heart. Word spread quickly through their social circle. More and more of their wealthy acquaintances began to take notice of the fulfillment and purpose radiating from Veronica and her friends. Inspired by their example, others started to get involved in charitable activities. Elizabeth, a prominent socialite known for her extravagant shopping sprees, surprised everyone by organizing a clothing drive for the homeless shelter. James, a successful businessman, began mentoring underprivileged youth in his spare time. Even the notoriously self-centered Sophia found herself volunteering at the animal shelter every weekend. The ripple effect of Sarah's kindness continued to spread, creating a larger movement of giving and compassion in their community. Local charities saw a surge in volunteers and donations. Community centers buzzed with activity as more people sought ways to give back. Sarah continued her work at the restaurant, but the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Gone were the days of snide remarks and condescending glances. Now, she was treated with the utmost respect by everyone, including her coworkers. As she moved through the dining room taking orders and serving dishes, Sarah noticed the difference in how people looked at her. There was a warmth in their eyes, a genuine appreciation that hadn't been there before. Her fellow waitstaff, once distant and sometimes competitive, now treated her like a cherished friend. "Sarah, you're an inspiration," whispered Jenny, another waitress, as they passed each other in the kitchen. "The way you handled everything, it's amazing." The restaurant patrons, many of whom had attended the charity gala, also treated Sarah with newfound admiration. They recognized her as the hero she truly was. Conversations would hush as she approached tables, and smiles would break out across faces. One evening, as Sarah served a couple their appetizers, the woman reached out and gently touched her arm. "We were at the gala," she said, her eyes brimming with emotion. "What you've done, not just for Veronica, but for our whole community. It's remarkable." Sarah blushed, still uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm just doing what anyone would do," she replied humbly. The man shook his head. "No, Sarah. What you did, what you continue to do, it's extraordinary. You've shown us all what really matters in life." As word of Sarah's heroism and volunteer work spread, even new customers treated her with a special kind of respect. They'd heard the stories, seen the change in the community, and recognized the quiet strength in the young woman who served their meals with grace and kindness. The restaurant owner, Mr. Thompson, called Sarah into his office one afternoon. She entered nervously, unsure of what to expect, but Mr. Thompson's face was beaming with pride. "Sarah," he began, "I want you to know how proud we are to have you here. You've not only saved a life in this restaurant, but you've also changed the very spirit of this place. Our customers love you, your coworkers admire you, and I'm honored to know you." Veronica and her friends gathered in her spacious living room, the air buzzing with excitement. They were planning their next charity event, and this time, they wanted to focus on a cause close to Sarah's heart. Sarah sat among them, a warm smile on her face as she watched these women, once so different from her, now fully committed to making a difference. "So, Sarah," Veronica began, her voice filled with genuine interest, "what other causes are you passionate about?" Sarah's eyes lit up. "Well, I've always wanted to do more for the local animal shelter. They're overcrowded and underfunded, and so many animals need homes." Emily, one of Veronica's friends, clapped her hands together. "That's perfect. We could host a pet adoption fair and fundraiser." The room erupted with enthusiastic chatter as ideas began to flow. Veronica grabbed a notebook and started jotting down suggestions. "We could have a silent auction for luxury pet items," she offered. "And a pet photo booth," added another friend, Lisa. "People love taking pictures with their furry friends." As they continued to brainstorm, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the transformation she was witnessing. These women, once consumed by materialism and social status, were now pouring their hearts into helping others. Their eyes shone with a new kind of joy, one that came from giving rather than receiving. Over the next few weeks, the group worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. They secured a beautiful outdoor venue, reached out to local businesses for sponsorships, and coordinated with the animal shelter to ensure everything ran smoothly. As they worked side by side, setting up booths and decorating the space, their bonds deepened. Conversations that once revolved around gossip and fashion now centered on making a difference and personal growth. "You know," Veronica said to Sarah as they hung a banner together, "I never knew how empty my life was until I started doing this. Thank you for showing us a better way to live." Sarah squeezed Veronica's hand, her heart full of gratitude for the unexpected friendship they had formed. "I'm just glad we found each other," she replied softly. Sarah stood at the edge of the bustling pet adoption fair, taking in the joyful scene before her. Families cooed over puppies and kittens, volunteers bustled about, and the air was filled with the sound of happy barks and meows. As she watched, Sarah's mind drifted back to that fateful night at the restaurant, and she marveled at how much her life had changed since then. Never in her wildest dreams had Sarah imagined that her simple act of kindness would have such a profound impact. She had always believed in helping others, but she never expected it to transform lives so dramatically, including her own. A warm feeling of gratitude washed over her as she thought about the unexpected friendships she had formed with Veronica and the others. Her life felt richer now, filled with a sense of purpose that went beyond her work and volunteer duties. The satisfaction of knowing she was making a real difference in her community gave her a deep sense of fulfillment. Sarah's eyes welled up with happy tears as she watched Veronica across the fairground, gently petting a rescue dog and explaining its story to a young couple. Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by Emily, who approached with a bright smile. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Emily asked, gesturing to the bustling fair around them. Sarah shook her head, still in awe. "It's amazing," she replied softly. "I never expected any of this." Emily squeezed Sarah's hand. "You changed our lives, Sarah. You showed us what really matters." As they stood together, watching the event unfold, Sarah reflected on the ripple effect of kindness. One small act had led to all of this. A community coming together, animals finding homes, and a group of women discovering the joy of giving back. As the pet adoption fair bustled with activity, Sarah, Veronica, and their friends worked side by side, their laughter and chatter blending with the happy sounds of animals finding new homes. The once unlikely group had become a tight-knit team, united by their shared commitment to making a difference in their community. Veronica, her designer clothes replaced by a simple volunteer t-shirt, knelt beside a timid rescue dog, gently coaxing it out of its crate. Her eyes, once cold and judgmental, now sparkled with warmth and compassion. "Come on, sweetie," she cooed. "There's a family out there waiting to love you." Sarah watched her friend with a smile, marveling at the transformation. She remembered the haughty woman who had entered the restaurant that fateful night, and it seemed like a lifetime ago. Now, Veronica was one of the most dedicated volunteers, always ready to lend a helping hand or offer words of encouragement. Emily approached, carrying a box of pet supplies. "Can you believe it's been a year since we started doing this?" she asked, setting the box down. "It feels like we've been friends forever." The women shared a knowing look, each silently acknowledging how much their lives had changed. What had started as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a beautiful friendship and a shared mission to spread compassion throughout their community. As they worked, they swapped stories and shared laughs, their camaraderie evident to everyone around them. They reminisced about their first volunteer events, the challenges they'd faced, and the joy they'd found in giving back. "Remember when Veronica tried to organize that black tie gala for the animal shelter?" Emily giggled, causing the others to burst into laughter. Veronica rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Hey, at least we raised a lot of money, even if the dogs did end up stealing the show." Sarah smiled, her heart full of gratitude for these women who had become such an important part of her life. Together, they had weathered challenges, celebrated successes, and learned the true meaning of friendship and community. As the day wound down, the friends gathered together, surveying the nearly empty fairground with a sense of accomplishment. Families were leaving with new furry additions, and the remaining animals seemed more relaxed, having received plenty of love and attention throughout the day. "We did good today, ladies," Sarah said softly, her voice filled with pride and emotion. Veronica nodded, wrapping an arm around Sarah's shoulders. "We did good because you showed us how, Sarah. You changed our lives, and now we're changing others." The women stood together, their lives forever intertwined by the events that had brought them together. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the fairground, they shared a moment of quiet reflection, each feeling grateful for the journey that had led them to this point. If you enjoyed the story of Sarah, Veronica, and her friends, I handpicked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.